turn it over to Urs Tony. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. What a way to start the keynote with a fire alarm, right? Because our world is changing at such an alarming rate, the leadership tools and methods that got us here won't get us there. And today, I'm going to demonstrate to you exactly how we can lead to win into the future of the life sciences. But before I do that, let me tell you about the movie that exemplifies everything that's wrong with leadership today. And I'll do it in my Texas accent, which of course I don't have. I'm Swiss, and I have a Swiss German accent. And that accent might require a little bit of extra effort on your part. But I hope it'll make the story even more enjoyable. The bridge of the Red October, a Soviet nuclear submarine, is tense with anticipation as a torpedo knives toward it. Impact means the ship will never surface again. Captain Ramius, in the movie The Hunt for Red October, turns to a CIA agent, you remember the movie, right? And asks, "So what books do you write?" Talking about books in this moment of imminent death seems like total lunacy. Are you kidding me? We're all about to go down and here you talk about books? But heroic Captain Ramius has a plan. A plan he's shared with none of his sailors who are totally in the dark, have no idea what's coming, and have now no choice but in blind faith wait for their imminent death. But at the last second, and somehow predictably of course, because it is Hollywood, heroic Captain Ramius steers the submarine into the torpedo's path, causing it to strike before its warhead is armed. This is quintessential heroic leadership. It's fearless, it's charismatic, it's overconfident. It makes for great Hollywood material. But despite what happened 2 days ago, it's utterly unrealistic and totally outdated. Yet many of us, even subconsciously, still gravitate towards this heroic leadership paradigm, where the leader sits on top of the org chart, has all the data, all the information, and makes all the calls him or herself. A leadership paradigm that's been handed down from generations before us. Now, we might not see ourselves as a heroic leader like Captain Ramius, but how many of us, if we're honest, at times have done some of these things? Not communicated enough about our thinking, our decisions, and in the process failed to gain buy-in or enthusiasm for our decision. Have you been on that bus? You're the leader, you're driving, you're all excited, you're going places. You look back to check on your team's on the other bus, driving in the other direction. I have driven that bus. Held onto control too tightly, maybe even micromanaged. I know, me neither, never. Or, and this is my favorite, heroically did our team members work instead of delegating because we wanted to get it done just right, just the way we wanted it, versus holding our team members accountable. I know I've done all these things, and I've worked for plenty of leaders and coached plenty of leaders who have, with often devastating results. Turnover increases, productivity declines, creativity suffers, making for very unhappy workplaces and ultimately killing the bottom line. But in a world that's changing faster than ever, competition, including for talent, ruthless, and yet another highly diverse generation entering the workforce, a new kind of leadership is required. A new kind of leadership that puts self-awareness, engagement, belonging, a growth mindset, and psychological safety at the forefront of everything we do, all while delivering results. A new kind of leadership that's tough on results and tender on people. That new kind of leadership I call leading with radical humility. Let me tell you why I'm so excited about this. Over the last 35 years, I had the privilege to lead teams in the uber-competitive world of ultra-endurance competition to numerous wins and records. Multi-day adventure races, bike races ranging in length from 500 to 3,000 miles. I've led teams in business, academia, and in complex peacekeeping operations in the Balkans, in Africa, and in the Middle East. But you know what was my biggest leadership challenge? I also served as the president of my boys' school parent-teacher conference, association, PTA. President of the PTA. You know, reigning in all those parents who are convinced the universe really was created to evolve around their little darling kids. I know we have none of these parents in the room. That's a leadership challenge, if there ever was one, requiring plenty of humility. But in all seriousness, I'm telling you a little bit about my background to let you know that I've seen firsthand what happens when we let go of outdated heroic leadership and embrace leading with radical humility. The 3 pillars of leading with radical humility we're going to talk about today. First, leading like a compass. Having the humility to know that as a leader, we can't and mustn't do it all ourselves. Instead, we need a strong, empowered team to help us get there. Second pillar, tough on results, tender on people, holding my team members to the highest standards while building meaningful and collaborative relationships with them. And lastly, championing a fearless culture, a psychologically safe culture. We'll talk through these 3 pillars today. I'm going to have you do 2 interactive exercises. I will not do a Q&A. I'll hang around afterwards. You can have a chat with me outside if you want to challenge me on some stuff. I always love that. So, in my research over the last 10 years, I've consistently found that leaders who embrace these 3 pillars operate at the highest level. Business, government, military, even professional sports. So let's do one quick preview. What do you think the best sports teams across all of time and all of sports have in common? Anybody, just yell it out. What do the best sports teams have in common? Teamwork, what else? Talent? Effort? Competition? Enlightenment? Money, yes. Leaders, absolutely. All of these things to some extent. But according to very thorough research, the dominance of the 17 best sports teams across all of time and all of sports corresponds with the arrival and departure of one particular player. And that player would eventually become the captain. What's more, these captains lacked superstar talent, they avoided the spotlight, they combined focused, aggressive play with the willingness to do the unthankful tasks in the shadow, and they all had a low-key, democratic communication style. In other words, the best sports teams across all of time and all of sports are led by radically humble captains. Carla Overbeck, the former US women's soccer captain. Any soccer fans in the room? You know, the real football? Yeah. She only scored 7 goals in her entire international career, which even for a defender is low. She would humbly always look for ways to pass the ball, even if she could score herself. On and off the field, Overbeck displayed great humility, often schlepping her teammates back to their hotel room after an especially grueling international flight. I'm the captain, she says, but I'm no better than anybody else. I'm certainly not a better soccer player. It's hard seeing Captain Rameau say this, right? Out of the public eye, in training or practice, Overbeck pushed herself and her teammates relentlessly. Her incredible work ethic, her back-schlepping humility off the field, her passing humility on the field allowed her to amass huge credit that she could spend if she needed to hold her team members accountable. Her being tender on people gave her license to be tough on results. Overbeck hates the spotlight of speaking in public. But when they were in training or traveling, she would constantly rally her teammates, her troops around their true north purpose of becoming and being the best soccer team on the planet. She led like a compass by relentlessly communicating their common goal, the best soccer team on the planet. At the same time, she gave everybody on the team a voice. She encouraged the younger players to speak up. She provided feedback, asked for feedback, provided mentoring. And in the process, built a fearless, psychologically safe culture at the US women's soccer team. During Overbeck's humble leadership, tough on results, tender on people, lead like a compass, build a fearless culture, the US women's soccer team dominated the competition almost at will, with numerous World Cup victories and Olympic medals. I'm telling you this little story for one key reason. Embracing humble leadership is within the reach of all of us. If it is possible to lead with humility and achieve kick-ass results in professional sports, the high-pressure environment that is professional sports, then doing exactly that is within every single person in this room. And the best part is, we don't need to have a fancy title or lead a large team to benefit from it. It's the small things within the reach of all of us we can do right today after we leave this room. How we listen to our kids, our family members, our significant others tonight. How we hold our team members accountable tomorrow. How we conduct our one-on-ones at department meetings next week. These small shifts towards humble leadership, when done consistently, leading to excellence. So, let's dive in. Pillar number 1, lead like a compass. Leading like a compass means providing our team members with true north versus giving them a detailed map on exactly how they need to go from where they are to where they need to be. It's the difference between comprehensive delegation, empowerment, and micromanagement. It's the difference between being relevant, highly relevant, versus too involved in the weeds. Let me make it come alive with a government story. And you go like, yeah, right. Give me a good government story. I think this one is actually a pretty good one. It's a glorious spring morning in Boston. The then Massachusetts Governor Devil Patrick had a thing of rare beauty as a public official. A day without appointments. He just finished a workout, was driving home, when his phone rings. It's the head of emergency management from the finish line of the Boston Marathon. Sir, we have a horrific disaster, terrible scenes. We need you to come down. We need to set up a command center. Most of us can remember how we felt when we first heard about the Boston Marathon bombing. How we felt in shock, how we felt vulnerable, maybe even how we felt angry. And how we felt for those who lost loved ones and those who suffered grave injury. We can all remember that. But what most of us are less familiar with is the highly effective response to the disaster. According to experts who study these events, the response to the Boston Marathon bombing has been credited as one of the most effective and collaborative responses to a disaster ever studied. And the key ingredient of that effectiveness was the leadership by Devil Patrick. He did something nobody else did. He didn't tell people what to do. He didn't make more decisions. He didn't rally the troops more. He did something nobody else did. He entered the command center each and every time asking, how can I help? The governor's leadership spread through all response teams and agencies, a leadership of deferring control and authority to those best suited for the task. Governor Patrick was keenly aware of the very common trap all of us fall in during crisis, the trap to micromanage in order to feel in control. The trap to grab the reins, yank, and overstep into areas best handled by specialists. But leading like a compass does not mean being passive. Governor Patrick relentlessly communicated their common goal: save lives, and yes, bring the perpetrators to justice. He also allocated resources at a high level. He was highly relevant by allocating resources at a high level because he was not too involved in the weeds. He made clear the FBI was in charge of the investigation, the mayor of Boston is running his streets. He also realized he could add tremendous value as a trusted communicator of government, giving people in Boston, Massachusetts, around the globe hope. And he continued to enter the command center each and every time asking, how can I help? I sure hope that none of us will ever have to lead through such a horrific experience. And nothing can ever take away the pain and suffering of those impacted by the events. And yet, there's a lesson for all of us here. With our world moving faster than ever, our frontline peoples often do not have time to feed a question up the org chart and wait for a response back. They need to make smart, independent, good decisions at the front lines, much like during disaster response. It might seem counterintuitive, but the faster things move, the more complex our role becomes, the more we need to give up control and authority. The faster things move, the more complex our role becomes, the more we need to empower and delegate. How do we do that? One thing we absolutely need to have in order to lead like a compass is clarity on our common goal. Rather than seeking control, we seek clarity on our common goals. How do we get there? Here's one quick hack we can all implement with our team members. Ask yourself this very simple question. Together with your team, what is the one thing? The one thing, not 3, not 5. Remember Jim Collins? You have more than 3 priorities, you have none. What's the one thing we need to do extraordinarily well around here in order to win? The one thing. And that one thing becomes our common goal. For Governor Patrick, it was save lives. Let me share a couple of common goals of teams I've been a member of. The peacekeeping mission in the Middle East, this one is, yes. And because it's the UN, it's about 14 words too long, but you get the gist here. Observe, report, investigate all incidences that violate UN Security Council Resolution 1701. Now, important thing about the common goal, it spells out the what, the why, but the how is up to me. I, as the team commander, can decide every morning, are we fulfilling our common goal by patrolling today? Yes, no. If we're patrolling, are we patrolling on foot, in an SUV, in an armored vehicle? The how is up to me. Similarly, common goal of a 530-mile non-stop race across Oregon, safely win the race and beat the course record, safety equals speed. The what's defined, the how's up to me. Do we attack in the flats, in the uphills? Do we start slow, finish fast? I had to attack in the flats because I'm too heavy for the climbs. So the common goals. Let me make the power of common goal come alive in action, quite literally in action. D-Day. The freeing of Nazi-occupied Europe by the Allied forces had been planned for months and years. But within hours of the planes taking off to the UK, the whole plan fell to pieces. For those of you who are familiar with D-Day or even have seen the very good TV series Band of Brothers, anybody see that? Yeah. So you know, the Allied forces were spread all over Normandy. Virtually no soldier landed in the designated drop zone they were supposed to land. They were spread all over the place. But because every soldier, down to the last private, had internalized their common goal, which was what? To secure key terrain. Bridges, roadways, villages. They had all internalized that. They were able to improvise. They started to form little ad hoc teams of 2, 3, 4, 5, and started to fight to achieve the common goal. D-Day was a planning disaster, but the common goal saved the day. For those of you who like a little model here, so this is old school map leadership. And by the way, I think, Kim, we can make those slides available for those of you who are interested afterwards. So old school leadership, I as the leader set the goal, and then I tell my staff members, my employees, my minions, exactly how they need to go from where they are to where they need to be. Compass leadership understands that this has never been effective. We just saw the power of common goal during D-Day. It's even less effective today. Our world is changing way too fast for this. Compass leadership understands that while I as the leader have to be crystal clear on our goal, and yes, ideally, we co-create it together with our team members, while I have the responsibility, the buck stops with me. I have the industry experience. I have the seniority. But do I really understand the minutiae of my people's work? Do I know how to deploy Canvas and HubSpot and how to best use Jira? Compass leadership understands the leader needs to be crystal clear on the goal and then empower each of their team members to decide for themselves for how they go from where they are to where they need to be. With as much innovation, creativity, and yes, new technology and self-direction as possible. Compass leadership is where team members thrive, teams shine, and where magic happens. Much like at the Ritz-Carlton. Isn't that a great picture? The president of the Ritz-Carlton, Hervé Hamler, tells the story about a wheelchair-bound young man who checked into the Ritz-Carlton in Dubai together with his family. Upon looking through the massive glass windows of the lobby down to the ocean, he took one look at the beach, turned to his family and said, "I sure wish I could swim in that ocean." The problem was that between the hotel and the sea lay a 50-meter stretch of soft sand over which the wheelchair impossibly could travel, hence crushing the young man's dream to swim in an ocean. Within earshot of the family was a maintenance worker who overheard the conversation, and she thought, "I'm going to do something about it." She quickly rounded up another 5 maintenance workers, and voila, a mere 6 hours later, there was the masterpiece, a brand new wooden walkway down to the ocean over which the wheelchair now could easily travel. For the team members at the Ritz-Carlton, it was just another day as part of an empowered culture where everybody can make decisions on their own with a true north compass of top service no matter what. For the young man, it was the first time he ever swam in an ocean. What the Ritz-Carlton is most proud about is that nobody needs to tell its employees to do these things. Nobody told the maintenance worker, "Go and build a walkway to the ocean." And she didn't have to check with the supervisor either. Instead, the Ritz has built a culture where every employee is empowered to make independent decisions, all with a true north compass of top service no matter what. Team members that stretch themselves, team members that inspire each other, that's the power of compass leadership at the Ritz-Carlton. It's foundational to creating memories that last a lifetime. So as they say at the Ritz, guests don't just stay at the Ritz, but the Ritz stays with them long after they check out. How do we bring it back? How do we make it operational? Here's what I want you to do. We all know the common goal of the Fred Hutch: end cancer, fight infectious diseases. And by the way, from the bottom of my heart, you've impacted my family's life very directly. So thank you for all the wonderful work that you all are doing. That's the overarching goal. But we each within our teams have the possibility to define the common goal. Sit down with your team, and it doesn't have to be a 2-month process of workshopping vision, mission. No, what's the one thing we need to hit out of the park between now and the end of the year, or now and end of Q1? What's the one thing? And that becomes our common goal. Pillar number 1, lead like a compass. Let's move on to pillar number 2, tough on results, tender on people. Tough on results, tender on people. Holding my team members to the highest standards while building meaningful relationships with them is the ultimate yin-yang of humble leadership. But how exactly does it relate to performance? As we go through these 4 quadrants, from soft on results to tough on results, from tough on people to tender on people, let's ask ourselves, where do I sit? Where does my boss sit? And where do the leaders across the Fred Hutch sit? The bottom right quadrant is the fear zone. We've all had bosses yell and bark orders who leave morale as office roadkill. And these are the bosses nobody wants to work for, and we have none of them today in this room, which is good. That's the opposite of psychological safety. People don't share what's really going on because everybody's afraid, walks around on eggshells. These are the bosses who light up the room simply by leaving it. The bottom left quadrant is the indifference zone. Here, the boss might yell at you, but there's no consequences for delivering subpar work, so people simply check out. A lot of the quit but stays happens here. The top left quadrant, some of us might be able to relate to. Here, the leader is so conflict averse that nothing ever gets corrected and standards continue to slide. If we're leading in this quadrant, we often burn out because we end up doing our team members' work. Remember, in the heroic leadership up front, we're doing our team members' work because we want to get it done just right. This is the people first, results never quadrant. The top right quadrant is, of course, the high performance zone, holding my team members to the highest standards while building meaningful and collaborative relationships with them. And what is one of the quickest and most powerful ways to build a trusting relationship with somebody? It's to show up with a bit of vulnerability. Now, we all agree that it's probably no good opening every team meeting in tears and my parents never really loved me, I don't know. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about getting it eye level with our teammates. We're talking about saying, you know what? I'm not quite clear about this either. I'm not quite sure about the answer here. What do you think? It's about saying, I'm working on becoming a better listener. What suggestions do you have for me to get better at that? Sharing a meaningful personal goal makes it clear to our teammates that we too are work in progress and always strive to get better. And we do it in 3 acts. The first act is me. The second act is my share, maybe an insecurity, a weakness, something I want to improve, a goal. And the third act, very important, is what am I doing about it? In 3 acts. Brad Smith, the former CEO of the financial technology company Intuit, is a shining example of how to build trust with a bit of vulnerability. Smith volunteered to his board to do a 360. A 360, as some of you probably know, how many of you have done a 360, by the way? Okay, so anonymously surveys everybody around you, strengths and weaknesses as a leader. You do it for the first time, it's scary. Why? You get the real deal feedback because it's anonymous. But Smith did not stop there. He volunteered. He wasn't told by the board. He volunteered to do one. And then he shared his 360 report, his strengths, his weaknesses, including his action steps, the third act, not only with his board, but with the entire company. He emailed his 360 report to every single person in the company, down to the last intern. And in the process, built humongous trust across all of Intuit. More importantly, he made it safe for everybody at Intuit to start working on their own stuff. Because you know what? If the CEO admits that he's not perfect and wants to get better, maybe I can do the same thing. This is an important and often misunderstood notion. Trust does not come before vulnerability, but vulnerability is one of the quickest ways to build trust. Sharing our shortcomings, for example, with our team members, while scary, makes us relatable. And by the way, I hate to break it to all of us. Our team members already know that we're not perfect. I'm going to pick on Paul. Why do Paul's team members, why does Kim know that Paul's not perfect? They work with each other every day. My teenage boys know I'm not a perfect dad. Why? They live with me. Everybody admires perfection from a distance, and nobody can relate to it. Let me share with you how building strong relationships with a bit of vulnerability helped me to achieve strong results at the UN. It's 2021. I'm deployed as a peacekeeper to the Middle East. Just finished a long day of patrolling the ceasefire line between Lebanon and Israel. Israel on the left here, Lebanon on the right. And as you all know, this is not a ceasefire line as of about 5 weeks ago, because the IDF actually started the ground assault here across that. But back then, it was still a ceasefire line. So I finished a long day, about to go out for a run in the military camp, when my phone rings. It's one of my Swiss officers in Syria. He sounds in distress. Urs, we have a terrible situation. We believe lives are on the line. Nobody's listening. We've tried everything. Can you help us in your role as Swiss National Senior Representative? He downloads some more details. Before we hang up, I tell him the next day there'll be a leadership meeting and I'll bring up his concerns then. I hang up. I'm not happy. I now have to get the commanding officer, the CEO in Syria, into trouble by asking for a change in leadership. It doesn't help that I'm a low-ranking officer and a newly promoted senior, so I have to work double hard to be taken seriously. Fast forward to the meeting. I lay out in no unclear terms the change that my officers need to see. I'm being very tough on results. I'm being very Swiss, very to the point. To my amazement, my voice is heard at the highest level. A low rank doesn't get me into trouble, and the concerns of my Swiss officers are immediately resolved. After the meeting, I was reflecting on this. What made it possible for me to be heard at highest level despite being a low-ranking officer? I believe the short answer is this. Up to this point, I've worked incredibly hard on relationship building, on being tender on people. A few weeks earlier, when I was first promoted to senior, instead of boasting about my new title, that would not be the humble way, I knew to be effective, I needed to build strong collaborative relationships with key members in the mission. So I pulled out the org chart and identified about 30 people who I knew I needed to build meaningful relationships with. And then I got to work. Over the next 10 days, I spent every hour I was not patrolling the ceasefire line on 30-minute relationship building meetings. During these meetings, I inquired about the other personal background, their concerns, hope for the mission, their expectation of me as a senior. No other business agenda up front. I learned the head of mission loved spending time in my hometown of Zurich in Switzerland together with his family. The chief of staff and I shared a mutual passion for ultra-endurance racing. We shared with a bit of vulnerability, built a foundation for a more trusting relationship. We moved from seniority to connection. There is no question in my mind that the main reason why my voice was heard at the highest level is because I made the effort to build meaningful collaborative relationships with key members in the mission. An important lesson from the story is this. Our feedback is much more likely to be acted upon and heard by both our team members and yes, our superiors if we've built meaningful and collaborative relationships with them. Being tender on people gives me license to be tough on results. Remember Karl Overbeck? And some leaders challenge me and say, I don't have time for this. And I get it. We all have too much on our plate. I get it. Relationship building is never efficient in the short term. I give you this all day. But it always pays in the long run. We never know who we have to rely on when the famous stuff hits the fan, as it always does. Building bonds with others is a preemptive move. So I just showed you my relationship chart. How does yours look? This is a great exercise, especially coming out of a merger. Pull out the blank piece of paper, put yourself in the middle, that's you, the circle, and then all the people who you're connected with around you. Your peers, direct reports, your bosses, our departments, people you haven't really interacted with much. Assess the level of relationship you have with each of that person on a scale of 1 to 5. And then assess the level of relationship you should have with that person on a level of 1 to 5. Set aside 30 minutes, plan how you're going to ask questions, how you're going to reveal a little bit about yourself. So, the Mentimeter didn't work here. Here, we're going to do a quick interactive exercise for a couple of minutes. I want you to ask yourself, where do I fall on this spectrum? Tough on results, tender on people. There's no right or wrong answers. We all are either more results-driven or more relationally driven. I'm a relationship person, so I actually have to work through my whole career on being more tough on results. So ask yourself that, share with your neighbor, and then if you are somebody who's more tender on people, what is one tough feedback you know you should give and you have not given yet? And commit to that. If, on the other hand, you're more tough on results, what's one act of tenderness that you want to perform? It could actually be simply saying thank you to a teammate. And by the way, in front of the whole team, thank you very much. Or sending a thank you email. Or even a gift, an act of kindness. So I give you 2 minutes, turn to your neighbor, where do you fall naturally, and then commit to however you fall here, to an act of kindness or tough feedback. Let's go, 2 minutes. All right, all right, all right. Let's bring it back slowly. All right, all right, all right. All right. Thank you all. I know. Right. Come on, boys. All right. Thank you very much. Thank you. We will do one other one. So, excellent. So I actually was planning to do a Mentimeter survey, and unfortunately the app or the plugin didn't load here. But if you're comfortable, by show of hands, who's more tender people? Nice and high. Okay. Who's more tough on results? Okay. So there's no right or wrong. Clearly, a vast majority of you is more tender on people, more relationally driven. So something to also think about when you're looking at your team is making sure you have a good balance in your team. If you're somebody who's more tender on people, make sure you have somebody on your team who's a real tough on results person, so you sort of complement each other, right? I mean, there's a whole different speech about how to hire for your own, not shortcomings per se, but for your own tendencies. And by the way, under stress, what do we do under stress? If we're somebody who's tough on results, what do we do under stress? We go even more into that direction. If we're more relationally driven, we're stressed, we even work harder on preserving the relationship. Excellent, thank you for playing. We will go to the third and last pillar, championing a fearless culture. Championing a fearless culture means making it safe for all of my team members to speak up with questions, concerns, crazy ideas, doubts, without feeling shamed or worse, risking their careers. And just to be clear, a fearless team or a psychologically safe team does not mean standing around in a circle holding hands singing Kumbaya. It does not mean that. It doesn't mean being nice. It doesn't necessarily mean being kind. It doesn't mean being cozy. And it's most definitely not about lowering performance standards. It's about being direct. It's about speaking truth to power. It's about sharing what's really going on in our team. And it's about making it safe for everybody to speak up. And sometimes it's about saying as the leader, I screwed that up. For those of you who are familiar with the research know that psychological safety first came out of Harvard 30 years ago. The research was popularized by Google and now has been replicated across a variety of industries. Airline crews, surgical teams, the military, financial services. A culture of psychological safety, a fearless culture, is the best predictor of a team's performance. It's more important than who's on the team, the size, if it's virtual or in person. So culture apparently doesn't only eat strategy for breakfast, it also eats talent for breakfast. So if it's that important, how do we do it? Here's a simple three-step framework we can all start implementing to help shift our team culture towards a fearless culture. Reframing failure, because if we like it or not, mistakes and failures will always happen to our team members. We might want to make sure people feel safe to speak up about it. Encouraging speaking up, acknowledging and thanking. Professor Amy Evanson, the queen of psychological safety out of Harvard, tells the story about a United Airlines captain who opens every crew meeting with these words. She says, I've never done a perfect flight before, and I'm going to prove it to you again today. I know, right? Who's flying this week or has flown this week? So imagine, exactly, right? You're all excited. Fred Hutch upgraded you to first class. You have a first class seat. You're standing there in the galley, and you overhear the captain. I've never done a perfect flight before. I'm going to prove it to you again today. So I need you. I need you to speak up when you see me do something wrong, because it will happen, and I will do the same for you. As you're reconsidering all your future United flights there, you go like, actually this might be one of the safest flights I've ever taken. But why? The captain is reframing failure for her crew members. She's encouraging speaking up. She's praising the messenger versus punishing the messenger. She's hugging the messenger versus shooting the messenger. And in the process, shifts the culture towards a more psychologically safe culture. The captain knows that there never will be such a thing as a perfect flight. I'm flying next week. There will be mistakes made on that flight. Much like for all of us, there never will be the perfect grant proposal, the perfect research paper, the perfect speech, the perfect client delivery, whatever. There won't be. The captain knows by reframing failure, encouraging speaking up, mistakes that are made by individuals, including her, the CEO of the plane, the captain, are caught by the collective. And the most important outcome improves, which is what? The safety of the flight. For those of you who work in clinical settings, you know that psychological safety quite literally can save lives. When every single person in the operating theater can speak up when they see the chief surgeon make mistakes, feel safe to do so, the patient outcome improves. My commanding officer in the Middle East had a different way of encouraging speaking up by modeling the behavior she wanted us to display. She opened an after-action review with these words: "I screwed that up. And I know it. And here's what I'm going to do so it will never happen again." Third act, remember? Her ability to go first, own her mistakes, then made it safe for all of us, and here it's my turn in front of the map, to own our own mess-ups. All because she went first. This particular after-action review led to much better operations on the ground. Operational effectiveness improved by 20% and safety by 30%, all because she went first. I screwed that up. These might be the most important four words we can say as leaders. The best and most successful teams understand that being vulnerable together is the only way that the team can become invulnerable. The best and most successful teams, even and especially in the military, understand that being vulnerable together is the only way that the team can become unstoppable. Here's a quick low-tech exercise we can all do to shift our teams towards a culture of psychological safety with two stuffed animals: a killer whale and a duck daisy. This is borrowed from Kim Scott's outstanding book, Radical Candor. At the next team meeting, nominate somebody for the Killer Whale Award. Somebody who you've seen do outstanding work the previous week. That person then gets to nominate somebody else the following week for the Killer Whale. Then, importantly, grab the duck daisy and share a mistake you've made that week. A mess up, your whoopsie daisy. It doesn't have to be something big. Maybe you misspoke in a meeting. Maybe you dropped a deadline. By sharing, and then somebody else self-nominates the following week for the whoopsie daisy. By sharing a mess up, a mistake we made, we help others avoid making the same mistakes. More importantly, we normalize speaking up about our mishaps. We make it safer to share what's really going on. You're going to love me for this, but we're going to do this right now. So, here's what I want you to do. I want you to turn to a different neighbor, please. And I want you to share who on your team will get the Killer Whale Award. So, on my team, my social media guy did really well for me this week. So, my social media guy gets the Killer Whale Award. And then, what was your whoopsie daisy this week? What did you mess up? I spoke, it was last week actually, in Bremerton, and I forgot my props. That's my pretty big whoopsie daisy. I forgot I have a t-shirt later, I'll show you as well. I forgot my props. That's my whoopsie daisy. 2 minutes, different person, killer whale, whoopsie daisy, let's go. All right, all right, all right. Let's slowly wrap it. So Paul, we can just leave it at that. I just want to talk about the whoopsie days. We'll just leave it at that, right? Thank you. So, a couple of questions for you. Who spoke with somebody they haven't met before? Show of hands. Who got to know somebody new? Who learned something new in this exercise? Who learned something new? Okay, most of you probably because you didn't know the other person's whoopsie days, right? It seems so silly, so simple, and it can be so powerful. Because the soft stuff is not soft. The soft stuff is tough. In the military, we often think of courage as going up against the enemy with a machine gun. And that requires guts, no question. But the real courage is being the person in the room who says things or asks things others don't have the courage to ask or say. Hey, what's really going on here? Or my favorite, what problem are we actually trying to solve? And for us as leaders, the real courage is providing a culture, an environment where it's safe for everybody to speak up. Despite the very clear business case for a fearless culture, for psychologically safe culture, fearless teams are still quite rare. This is exactly why a fearless, a psychologically safe culture can be a huge competitive advantage within your team at the Fred Hutch, especially as we're competing in a big way for talent. So let's start our fearless journey right here today, even if it's just with 2 stuffed animals. So let me, before I wrap it up, in the interest of having the learning continue beyond the keynote today, there's exercises, research, more resources on my website. There's nothing for sale, to be super clear, on my website. Even if you tried, you can't buy anything. You can buy my book, but not through my website. So let me wrap it with one final story that embodies all 3 of these pillars. Check out this job ad. Men wanted for hazardous journey, small wages, bitter cold, long months of complete darkness, constant danger, safe return doubtful, honor and recognition in case of success. Excuse the totally outdated gender language, it's a very old ad. 2 questions for you. Who's in? I know, I'm sure we have adventurous people in. Second question, who wrote the ad? Nobody?
This is Ross.
This?
Dating app.
That's right. I can't remember, was it Bumble or Hinge or what? This ad is said to have been placed in London newspapers by Irish polar explorer Sir Ernest Shackleton. With both the North and South Pole conquered, the one remaining polar challenge was to cross Antarctica on foot via the South Pole. And Shackleton needed 26 crew to get it done. How many do you think applied? You just saw the ad. 5,000. 5,000, and you thought you had talent issues here? Like maybe take a page out of Shackleton's job description, job ad book. 5,000 applied. Shackleton was unconventional, unorthodox, well ahead of his time in terms of his humble leadership, as we'll see. He hired for life outlook and attitude and trained for skill. One man he asked during the interview, "Can you sing?" And when the young man responded, "Well, can I hold a tune? Probably not. But can I join into a rowdy sing-along together with my mates? Absolutely." The young man was hired on the spot. After Shackleton assembled his crew, he made relationship building his core #1 leadership priority. He wanted to get to know each man, their strengths, their weaknesses, their personal styles. He was tender on people by getting to know each of his crew members intimately and personally. But he could also be tough on results. After they crossed the Atlantic from England and arrived in Argentina, the cook got terribly drunk one night and behaved highly disorderly. Shackleton knew the man's not fit for mission, fired him on the spot. But in his tender way, he found the cook another job on a ship that sailed back to England. The crew set off from Argentina and sailed south. They didn't know it, but there would be more pain, misery, and danger awaiting them than they could ever have imagined. Just 100 miles from reaching Antarctica, their ship, the Endurance, got stuck in the thickening pack ice. They were 1,000 miles from the closest human being. Nobody knew their whereabouts. And remember, this was well before fancy outer gear like down jackets and Cortex shells. They had no choice but to settle in for a long, miserable, dark winter. During the 10 long months that followed, Shackleton made keeping morale of his crew up his top leadership priority. He organized regular sing-alongs, poker nights, birthdays became elaborate celebrations. He even, and I love this, organized soccer matches on the ice and dog sled races. To fight boredom, increase stimulation, tear down hierarchy, he had every crew member cross-train on every other position on the ship. The scientists would help peel potatoes in the galley, the photographer would help with the sled dogs, and he himself would scrub and clean the ship. Every man received the same portions regardless of rank or position, unheard of on other English ships. In today's terms, we would say Shackleton tore down silos, drove engagement, built a strong team, drove trust. Because of this trust, every crew member knew it was safe to come to Shackleton. He was famous for being able to speak to and listen to anybody. He praised the messenger versus punished the messenger, made it safe for everybody to speak up and ask questions. In the process, built a fearless, a psychologically safe culture almost 100 years before the phrase was coined. After 10 long months, the pack ice started to shift and move. But instead of freeing the Endurance, the shifting and moving pack ice started to crush the ship and the Endurance sank. Their only way to reach safety disappearing before their very eyes. The crew was stuck in the middle of Antarctica on floating ice with nothing more but 3 open life rafts and a pile of gear. As the ice continued to shift and move, they would sometimes wake up in the middle of the night and there's a foot-wide gap under their tent. Shackleton dug deep and knew the only way to safety was to try and reach one of the closest islands 200 miles away. During the 16 miserable long days and nights at sea, Shackleton changed destination 5 times because of changing weather conditions. When conditions changed, Shackleton had the humility and the self-awareness to say, I screwed that up, swiftly change course. After 16 days, they arrived on Elephant Island. For the first time in 16 months, they set foot on land. But there was nobody there to help them. The crew was in terrible condition, food was running low. Shackleton dug deep again and realized now the only way to safety was to try and reach the closest whaling station on St. George Island, 800 miles away, across one of the most treacherous seas in the world, where 100-foot waves are the norm. He grabbed his best life raft, 5 men, 800 miles in an open life raft across one of the most dangerous seas in the world. No maps, only the stars. Miraculously, after 3 long weeks, they made it. Do we have any sailors or boaters in the room? Show of hands. I'm speaking to you specifically, of course everybody else as well. To this day, this is considered the greatest feat of open water navigation we know of. To this day. But they landed on the wrong side of the island. To get to the whaling station on the other side of the island, they had to climb over 10,000 feet high glacial mountains. The manager of the whaling station on the other side of the island was a tough Norwegian whaler called Searle. Searle knew of Shackleton, but like the rest of the world, presumed him dead. So when Shackleton and his 5 men finally walked into the whaling station, knocked on Searle's door, he opened the door, took a step back, He had a shocked look on his face. There was a long pause, and he finally said, "Who the hell are you?" The man in the center stepped forward and in a quiet voice said, "My name is Shackleton." Searle, the tough Norwegian welder, not exactly known for his strong display of emotions, turned around and broke down in tears. It took Shackleton another 4 months, 4 attempts, 4 ships to finally rescue the rest of his crew, who by then had been stuck in Antarctica for almost 2 years. Shackleton's mission clearly failed. Not only did he not reach Antarctica, not only did he not cross Antarctica, he never even reached the continent. And yet he had the humility to recognize his failure. And through every part of the journey, he led like a compass by being crystal clear, by rallying his troops around the common goal. Reach Antarctica, survive the winter, get to Elephant Island, get to St. George Island, bring home everybody safe. Shackleton's voyage to this day is considered the #1 survival story, and his leadership is widely admired, including a Harvard Business School case study on his leadership. Why? Well ahead of his time, he applied himself to humble leadership. How? He led like a compass, he was tough on results, tender on people, and he championed a fearless culture. Quick personal anecdote before I wrap it here. I've admired Shackleton's leadership for a long time. So in 2001, the Seattle Maritime Museum organized an exhibition about Shackleton's voyage. I bought my father, this t-shirt, and it has the endurance on the front, and in the back it contrasts Shackleton's leadership to some other polar explorer. It reads, "For scientific discovery, give me Scott. For speed and efficiency of travel, give me Amundsen, a Norwegian explorer. But when disaster strikes and all hope is gone, get down on your knees and pray for Shackleton." That's, by the way, one of his crew members' quote. I gave this t-shirt to my dad as a gift, and he wore it on many of our outdoor adventures we did together. My dad passed away in 2010, and we had a very close bond. And ever since, I've been holding on to this t-shirt as a reminder of the strong bond we had and our mutual admiration for Sir Ernest Shackleton's radically humble leadership. Now, there's a good chance, maybe with the exception of the gentleman in the back who raised his hands before, that none of us will ever try and reach Antarctica on foot. I'm a pretty adventurous guy, but this one I'm probably going to give it a miss. The lesson remains though, if Shackleton could apply himself 100 years ago to leading with radical humility, then doing exactly that is within the reach of every single person in this room. The future of leadership in the life sciences is leading with radical humility, and it starts right here with every single person in this room. It's about the commitment we make to the sort of leader we want to be, the sort of team we want to build, and yes, the sort of organization we want the Fred Hutch to grow into, and yes, the sort of world we want to live in. So here's my invitation and my challenge to all of us. While these 3 pillars are still fresh in your minds, let's over the next 3 days commit to one action ever so small. It might simply be saying thank you to somebody publicly, or setting aside 30 minutes to get to know somebody better that we really should know better. One thing, one action over the next 3 days, we can all do that. If you can do that, if I can do that, if we can all do that together, then I'm convinced our finest days as radically humble leaders in the life sciences at the Fred Hutch are still ahead of us. Thank you so much for all the wonderful work you're doing, and thanks for having me.